Welcome to our first episode exploring Megillas Rus. This follows our series on Bereshit because the story of Rus addresses some of the lingering issues from Gan Eden, specifically the curses related to humanity's produce, where man is cursed by what he can produce from the land and woman is cursed by the produce of her body. Rus picks up these themes, the produce of the land and of the body. But first, we need to find ways to see a story that we are so intimately familiar with through fresh eyes. Thanks for joining us.
Okay. All right, so welcome to Megillas Rus. I'm not going to do Ruth or Ruth. I can't. No, we're doing Rus. Okay, so our quotes. The first one hopefully sort of ties together what we had learned last time, meaning Bereshit, with what we're going to be learning, and that is a quote from the Gemara in Brachos, which says as follows: Ilan she'achal mimenu Adam Harishon, the tree from which Adam Harishon ate was? Esrog.
Fig.
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 No, you gotta say something besides esrog and fig.
It's not an apple.
Not an apple. You can go for grape.
Grape.
Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Chita Haisa. It was wheat. Why? How do you know that it was wheat?
That's it was a little baby.
Yes. She'ein hatinok yodeh lekros abba ve'ima ad sheyitom tam dagan. Because a child does not know how to call his father and mother until he tastes the taste of grain. That is how Svaria translates it. I don't understand what any of this means. So, if the kid does not know how to say Abba and Ima, then it couldn't be wheat. Or because they ate from it, they were able to say Abba and Ima. No takers? Okay. Well, the point is to connect what we're about to learn, which everything that this Megillah is about is related to bread and wheat and the crop season. So, and we're in Beis Lechem of all places. So that will come into sharper relief. The second quote I have for you is from the movie The Game. Has anyone seen the movie The Game? Michael Douglas? Okay. Just want to make sure. Yeah, classic,
really?
Right?
How classic?
Very.
What's the rating on Rotten Tomatoes?
I have no idea what Rotten Tomatoes is.
Oh my god.
That's how classic it is.
Well, if you get a lot of tomatoes, then it's fresh, and that means it's good.
I've never seen it. It's about a hitman?
No, not about a hitman. It's a very wealthy man who gets sucked into this game. Actually, his brother, I think, buys it for him for his birthday.
Right. It's a birthday present.
And it's hard for him to tell if he's being
The game.
Right, if he's being tortured and played with, or if he's actually having fun in the game.
Is it like a live action mystery? He's just it's like dinner theater, but it's his life, and just this crazy stuff is going on at him and around him.
So the character Michael Douglas meets with someone else who's actually gone through this before, and the guy says to Michael Douglas, "I envy you. I wish I could go back and do it for the first time all over again. Here's to new experiences." The reason for that quote is because we have all become very overly familiar with Megillas Rus, and it is hard to experience it for the first time, but I want to try to do that, and now Shimi's gone down the rabbit hole.
I can't even find it. So must we go something else?
No, it's The Game.
It's called The Game.
Michael Douglas, The Game. Okay, so we've all heard lots and lots of drushas about Rus. We've read Rus every year for many, many years. But we're going to try to read it anew, and I have some ideas for how to do that. I know we've also gone through Megillas Rus ourselves 4 or 5 years ago. I will give you a very brief story. Oh, yeah.
80% tomato meter, 84% audience. So they have two things, right? So they have the critic,
Yeah.
is 80%, and you have the audience. That's pretty good. 85 is pretty good. Pretty good. Not classic, but pretty good.
Okay.
Why would it, if Rus is the matriarch, right?
Yeah.
Mashiach, let's say. Why isn't it not become a mainstream name?
Who says it's not? I mean, how do you gauge whether it's a?
I don't know. I would think it'd become more biblical, like more like a Sarah Rivka Rachel Leah type,
Right, I hear that.
category.
How many Ruths do you know?
Not that many.
Oh.
That's what I'm saying. It's not. I know
I
a ton
think
of
like
Leahs.
an older. I think it was an older generation kind of name. I think it felt.
It's coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's not as new agey, but maybe it's on its way back.
Okay.
So even though we are sort of doing a review, I wanted to give you a story from Rav Soloveitchik. One of his Talmidim, the yeshivas go through like 8 Masechtas, like they have a little cycle. So he had a Talmud who was with him when he did Bab Metzia, one time and then again. Just pour the whole thing into the cup.
I'm trying to just let the sediment settle.
Oh, okay. And after his explanation of a complex sugya in Bab Metzia, the Talmud sort of pipes up and says, well, that's not how the Rav explained it last time. And he said, every time I look at it completely new, I don't go back to my old notes. Ein beis medrash below chiddush. We're gonna try efshar lebeis medrash below chiddush, I should say. Okay. I guess we'll do this part first, and then we'll do the background. So we go into the story with a lot of assumptions. Well, this is like an art form.
No attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yes. One of the things I want to do to try to help us reread the story with some fresh eyes is make some statements that are, we'll call them a little sensational. And they are not necessarily things that I actually believe. I'm going to put them out there to help us think differently about the Megillah. And you'll see if you feel that you agree or disagree or want to try to disprove or support what we're saying as we go through the course of this Megillah. So the first thing I would like to point out is that Rus, the story of Rus is not about Rus. The Megillah is not, Rus is not the main character of the Megillah. Why not? Who is the main character of the Megillah if it's not Rus, even though the book is named after her, or the Megillah?
Nami?
There's not a lot of characters, right? So why would it be Nami?
Because this is her leaving, coming back, and her continuation, albeit through Rus.
Meaning Rus is going with Nami, right?
Rus is not there at the beginning. Nami is there at the beginning. Rus is not there at the end. Nami's there at the end.
Nami's following.
Right. From a story perspective, Rus doesn't really change over the course of the story. She's just awesome the entire time. Nami's the one who starts off like, oh, I'm bitter and everything is bad, and in the end, everything is good. Like, she goes through a transformation over the course of the story, whereas Rus does not. Another thing to consider is that of all the people who we will look favorably on in this story, Boaz is probably the one that we would look at maybe the least favorably. Why would that be true? Or would it not be true?
I don't think
I feel like it's all about Ploni Almoni.
Okay, we're gonna get to Ploni Almoni, but if we have to pick a bad guy in the story,
He's not a bad guy. Because
not a bad guy.
Story's mostly about one of the main themes supposedly is chesed. They always say that.
Okay.
It's about chesed, and he certainly showed a lot of chesed.
Did he?
In the way that he allowed the. Well, did he go above with her? He went above what he had to do for her.
What?
Well,
let's hear. What did he do that was
the way
above
he
and
let
beyond?
her do. I mean, everybody has the right, I guess, to collect in the fields.
Yeah.
But
Right.
he made it easier for her, and then he wasn't the closest relative. He didn't have to marry her.
He wasn't the closest relative.
Did he have to? Was you like he had to marry or not? He could have done these. All right, whatever.
Okay, well, I guess that'll take us to one of our next one. Let me address part of what you said, and then we'll get to the Yibum Chalitza thing. Rus and Naomi show up in Beis Lechem poor, and Rus goes to Boaz's field and is like, "Oh, I need to collect food because I'm super poor." And Boaz is like, "Oh, I know all about that. If I'm Boaz or anyone else is Boaz, just cut Naomi a check, right?" Rus spends the entire harvest season continuing to be poor and needing to go to be dependent on Boaz's good graces to get even the tiniest amount of food.
Is it a long-term thing? I don't know.
It's the whole. It's unfair because we haven't read it, but
Yeah.
when we do read it, I want you to notice that Boaz doesn't do anything to alleviate. He doesn't say move in. He doesn't say, you know what, you're not poor anymore. I'm your relative. I'm happy to take care of you. He does the opposite.
Very distant relative, right? Or no?
Well, I mean,
think
like,
it's-
should
I don't know.
there's like
He didn't know. Did
He
know
could
about-
have. He certainly could have made her not poor. He was wealthy enough to do that. We'll get to the Yibum thing. I guess that's going to be one of the other sensational comments, which is I don't believe any sort of yibum takes place or could even take place in this story whatsoever.
He'd have to,
Wasn't a brother.
Yeah, there's no brother. Once her kids are dead and there is no other kid,
Right.
there's no more mitzvah of yibum at all.
But doesn't the story discuss like Tony Ammonian that he didn't want and he takes his place? So that's somewhere. Is that a?
Yeah, so we're gonna have to dig into that like super.
Yeah,
I mean, a lot
super
of questions in the whole when the
yeah.
Gayrus is like.
Oh,
never
good.
makes
I'm glad
sense.
you brought that up.
I mean,
What? Okay.
I mean, obviously.
Is there an
prophet
example?
Hillel couldn't have-
Is there an example in all of Tanakh, in the actual like words of Tanakh, where someone converts? Is there in the Torah the concept of conversion? And you're going to tell me, well, what about the word ger? So I would argue to you that the word ger definitely does not mean convert.
Yeah,
means
I'm not gonna.
Right. Okay.
Um,
Yes, I know the Chazal will talk about Yisro and right.
No, but Yisro leaves.
Yisro leaves and doesn't say anywhere that he converts.
Right.
It is very possible that there is no such thing as a convert.
All like the Bill of Zilpah, they weren't considered.
That was before Matan Torah anyway. Part of the reason we want to view Rus as a convert is because the Torah says, "Lo yavo amoni umoavi b'kahal Hashem."
Yeah, but they already take care of that.
Okay, so how do they take care of that?
Ammoni v'lo ammonis.
What does that mean?
Meaning it was against the men, not the women.
Okay, the same pasuk or the same psukim that say Lo yavo amoni umoavi b'kahal Hashem also say Lo yavo mamzer b'kahal Hashem, Lo yavo mitzri b'kahal Hashem. There's a whole bunch of people who are
Mitzri v'lo mitzris. You heard it here first.
No, you heard it. We'll get to. There's a klal from Rav Tzadok HaKohen. I haven't seen it earlier than him. That anytime there is an agadata, the Gemara that it's in is related to that topic. So the Gemaras that have the agadata about Rus are in Yavamas. That itself is very interesting and seems to be very frequent. Okay, I think that's enough to at least get us thinking. Oh, the Ammoni Moabi thing requires a lot more explanation, and I think maybe next time we'll go through the Gemara itself in
What
depth.
was your first question? Who's the main character?
Who's the main character?
You said Nami.
I have my money on Nami. What do you say?
I just remember that there's like a midrash or something that says the whole reason the book is written only because
Yes.
of David.
Okay.
So you could say David's like.
Yes, for sure. So there are two midrashim that you mentioned. One is Reb Zera. Reb Zera says that Megillas Rus has no Isser and Heter and no you can't learn any halachos out of it. It's only there to teach you the value of chesed. There's no mitzvos in it, only the value of chesed. That statement is like a nice drash, but it's not actually true. There's lots of mitzvos in Megillas Rus. Maybe most importantly, all the halachos related to conversion come from here, like pushing away the convert and all the things that you're supposed to do. We learn from the Ami. There are other Megillas that have no halachos, like Shir Hashirim. There's actually, if you go on Sfaria, they have a nice visualization where you can take any book in Tanakh and see which halachos in the Shulchan Aruch quote psukim from that book. So you can actually trace like which psukim translate into which halachos. So there's actually quite a few. There's Leket Shechem Pei we talked about, but his general point is that the moral of the story of Megillas Rus is exactly what you were talking about Chesed. And yes, there is and I guess this will take us into the conversation that we started. But the other measures that you're talking about is that the Megillah is 85 psukim. The last 5 psukim are really the ones that Stephen is saying we should care about, which are the genealogy of David HaMelech. Right. The whole point of the book is to get us to and here's how we got to David.
The thing the Torah said for Bereshit is just to get us to Shemos where we get the Torah.
Right.
That makes sense. And Shmuel wrote Rus, as we know.
Okay. That was going to be one of my questions. Who wrote Rus? How do you know Shmuel wrote Rus?
Well, I mean, I learned, my kids know that song from the Gemara.
It's a Gemara in Baba Basra, 100%. It's a Gemara in Baba Basra.
And Shmuel is so involved with, with the start with David.
Yeah, he's for sure.
So that makes a lot of sense. But,
For sure.
that he wrote Rus because of David.
Right.
Which song?
So-
Can you sing it?
Just who wrote.
Don't
who
put him
wrote
on the
all
spot.
Who authored all the.
Amar Le Bar Hey.
They went to Pesach of Chaim. They know everything by heart because they sing everything.
That's
They
awesome.
teach them everything.
That's such a smart move, by the way.
Julius Claudius is amazing.
That is awesome. But it sparks the follow-up question, which is, why do we have a book for the genealogy of David and not a book for the genealogy of Shmuel or Shaul or anybody else?
Well,
Like,
because of Rus, right? So that goes back to Rus because he came from a Moabite.
in other words, we sort of need to justify
Yeah.
him being like a Jew
Right.
because he comes from
Right.
someone who's not a Jew, and that's a little murky, right? That's not necessarily so pasha that Amoni umo avi b'kahal Hashem. Okay, so let's take a deeper dive into that. There is a Gemara in Yevamos Daf Ayin Vav Amud Beis, and it starts with a Mishnah which says Amoni umo avi asurim. You cannot a Moabite and an Ammonite are prohibited from entering into the congregation and marrying a woman who was born Jewish, and their prohibition the isuran isur olam, and they are forbidden forever from doing such a thing. Aval nekevo sehem mutaros miyad, but their women folk are permitted immediately. And then the Mishnah continues with what I was cheppering Yissi with. Mitzri viadomi ena masurim ela ad shloshat, but a Mitzri and an Edomite are not forbidden after 3 generations. Echad zacharim v'echad nekevos. Men or women can convert from the Mitzri nation, I guess, to become Jews after 3 generations. Reb Shimon matir es nekevos miyad, and Reb Shimon says you can obviously marry a Mitzri girl immediately because Reb Shimon kal v'chomer hadvarim. Ma'im b'makom she'asar zacharim isur olam. If by Amoni Moavi they're forbidden forever, but their women are permitted immediately. Hiters nekevos miyad makom shelo asar es hazacharim el ad shalosh hadar. So then a Mitzri or an Edomi who's less of a degree removed because they can get in within 3 generations. Enodin she natir es nekevos miyad. So their women folks should be permitted immediately. Amrlo im halacha nekabel v'im ladin yesh tshuva. So the response was, if you made that statement not as a logical inference, but as a tradition from Lachal Moshe Sinai, then I accept it. But if we're talking logic, I can answer you, Amr Lahem, ki halacha ani omer. Lo, ki halacha ani omer. So he responds, no, don't get confused by the fact that I told you it was a kal v'chomer. It's not a kal v'chomer. It's actually a halachal Moshe Sinai that I have as a Masorah, and therefore we're going to stick with it.
So the women in Egyptian still 3 generations.
3 generations. No, I'm sorry. The women miyad. The women miyad, yes. Yeah. The women immediately, the men 3 generations.
What does 3 generations mean?
It means that so the Gemara will go through it, but the Mitzri can convert, but only marry another Mitzri who also converted, and then their children have to marry another Mitzri who converted, and then their children who can marry into Klal Yisrael. That's the 3rd generation.
Specifically Mitzri that converted? Or?
Yeah, it sounds like Mitzri. So I think there's a little discussion about, like, can a Mitzri 3rd generation marry an Edomi 3rd generation? Yeah. It becomes moot because Sancheriv came and mixed up all the nations, right? Assyria came and moved people around. So the whole thing becomes moot because, and this is actually going to be very relevant later on, the way you define a guy is by where they live, not their, like, how do you decide that someone is a Moavi? What if they converted to Edomiism or Mitzriism? Can they
live there?
Right. So the answer is wherever you live, that's who you are. If you were a Moavi and you moved to Mitzrayim, now you're a Mitzri. Right? That's like a weird thing if you think about it. Because if I'm a Mitzri woman and I want to convert to Judaism, I could just move to Moab and then convert. Right? Okay. Minan immediately. How do I know all this? I'm Rabbi Yochanan Damar Kra. V'kir'os Shaul es David yotze l'kras haplishti. So there's the Agada here is going to fill us in on a conversation that took place between Shaul and his advisors when David came to fight Goliath. So Shaul asks, what does he say? He says, Mize Hanar, who is this boy? And Avner ben Ner has to explain to him who David is. V'yomer Avner, Chei nafshecha hamelech im yadati, I have no idea. That's what the pasuk says. V'lo yadalei. Did they not really know who David was? V'haksid ve'yavehu me'od v'hi lo nosa kelim. David was already in the royal entourage. He carried his Shaul's stuff. Ela ahuva ka mashel. Rather, he was asking. I'm sorry, avua ka mashel. He was asking about David's father, meaning he was asking about his lineage. V'aviv lo yadale. Did he not know who David's father was? V'haksiva ish b'imei Shaul zakein baba nashim. That David was famous. V'yomer Rav v'i sema Reb Abba ze Yishai avi David. When it says that the man was zakein baba nashim, it means that Yishai, the father of David, shenichnas be'uchlusa. He came with a whole entourage, with multitudes. So no, says the Gemara, Hachika Amar, Shaul, mi peretz asi, mi zerach asi. Shaul was really asking Avner, where does David come from? Meaning, Yehuda had two sons. Yehuda had three sons. Two of those sons died, and the third one, Shelah, we're going to put to the side for now, and then he had two more sons. His two other sons were Peretz and Zerach. One of those two is going to have the lineage that will proceed onto Malchus, and the other is not. So Shaul wants to know, David, okay, I get that he comes from Yehuda, but is he from the Peretz Yehuda or the Zerach Yehuda? Imi Peretz Asi Malka Havi. If he comes from Peretz, then he's going to be a king. Why? Because the king is allowed to be Poretz, he's allowed to break through and make the king's highway wherever he wants. But if this guy David, who is now showing up to take on Goliath, if he comes from Zerach, so he'll be very chashav. He's still going to be an important guy, but he's not going to be king. My time Amar le Shaul ale. Why is he asking about David? Shaul as David madav kemidato uksiv be bashol mishichmu v'mala gavo mikol ha'am. Okay, he's trying to size him up, in a sense. That it says about Shaul that he was a shoulder taller than everybody else, and it means, does he have that royal stature? Can he shoulder the burden, so to speak, of Malchus? Amar le Doeg Hadomi. Okay, so do we know who Doeg Hadomi is? Doeg Hadomi is like the quintessential bad guy in Shmuel. He's the guy who tells Shaul that David hid out in the city of Nov and they kill out the whole city of Nov. He's also like the prime example of a Talmid Chacham who uses his wisdom for bad. So he becomes like the renegade in the Gemara, in the Agadata. He's the example of like the Chacham who went off the derech, so to speak. So Doeg says to Shaul, Ad she'ata mashil alav. You're busy asking, like, is David going to be king or is he just going to be chashuv? You're asking the wrong questions. You should be asking, im hagun hu lamachus v'im lav Shaul alav im roy lavo b'kahal im lav. Maybe he's not even Jewish. What you're so busy figuring out, like, is this guy going to be king? Do I have to worry? Is he going to steal my job? Worry about whether or not you're dealing with the shagets over here.
We did Doeg in villains in Tanakh.
Yeah, I think we did do Doeg in villains in Tanakh.
I believe so.
Yeah, the whole Doeg and David are two sides of the same coin. There's even a gematria that puts them together, but they're both, Doeg is Adomi, right? He's red, and David is described as red. And okay, we'll leave that for a different time. My taima to asi mirus hamoaviyah. Doeg says, why are you even asking about David, king, not king? He comes from he comes from a shiksa. He comes from Rus. Amar le Avner. So now we get this like scholarly discussion between Doeg and Avner. Avner says, Tanina Amoni velo Amonis, Moavi velo Moavis. What do you mean? We have the drasha. Ela miata. So Doeg answers back to him, Mamzer velo Mamzeres. It says, the pasuk says, Lo yavo Mamzer bekal Hashem. Right? You don't say a Mamzer is not allowed in, but a Mamzeres is allowed in. Mamzer ksiv mumzar. So he answers him that the way you should read mamzer is mumzar, is broken up as two words, meaning only someone who's comes from a defective relationship, whether male or female, those are the ones who are not allowed in. Mitzri, velo mitzris. Again, the pasuk says lo yavo mitzri b'kal Hashem for up to 3 generations. So that means a mitzri male, but not a mitzri female. Shani hacha the mafresh taima dekra. So Avner now answers the second level, where we've gone out of trying to expound just from the words, and we get to the context. The Torah doesn't just say lo yavo amoni moavi b'kal Hashem. It says why. Why can't you marry a Moni and a Moavi? Shlokimu belechem b'mayim. They didn't greet the Jewish people with bread and water. And what else did they do that was not nice? I'll read it for you.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
They hired Bilam.
Bilam. The Mefarish time of the Kra. Al asher lo kidmu eschem belechem b'mayim. Darcho shel ish lahakdim v'lo darcho shel isha lekadem. So this is the answer of Avner. The way of, so the pasuk says the reason you can't allow Moni Moavi b'kal Hashem is because they didn't greet you with bread and water, right? Who's going to come out and greet them? It's not going to be the women. That's going to be a recipe for licentiousness. That's going to lead to all kinds of hanky panky. So it's the way of the men to come out and greet someone who's trying to come through and conquer their land, and not the way of the women. This whole idea of like the fact that the Ammoni and Moavi didn't come out when the Jewish people are conquering everybody left, right, and center, and didn't come out and be like, would you like some bread? That's going to require its own explanation, but let's assume that was their responsibility to do, to like greet the Jew.
Meaning the bill should be A and the bread should be B.
So there's 2 reasons the pasuk gives. A, they weren't greeted with bread and water, and B, they hired Bilam.
I think, shouldn't it be reversed though? Like Bilam should be a little bit more egregious.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know. The pasuk puts them, I believe, in that order. So darcho shel ish lekadim v'lo darcho shel isha lekadim. So it's
maybe some chronological order.
Maybe.
Also, it's like if you think about it, like we're relatives. Mm-hmm. Not only didn't it's like you didn't say hi, and you hired a hitman.
Right.
Right. Exactly. It's like so at least you can be like nice about it, right?
Right, even that, it still requires Ian, because Ammon didn't hire Bilam.
Right. How did we get dragged into this?
So that's Avner's teretz is only the men should be prohibited because it's the men's fault for not showing up with bread and water. It's not the women's fault. They kol kvoda bas melech pnima, right?
So did they bake the bread and did they draw the water?
Okay, so Doeg kind of goes in that same. Doeg's like, look, if your problem is like there's no way to do this in a frum way, we'll find a way to do it in a frum way. You could have had the men greet the men and the women greet the men, and we could have separate entrances and everyone Shalom al Yisrael. That was Doeg's question back to Avner. So if you're following the volley, Avner is defending David's lineage, Doeg is questioning it, and at the end of the day, says the Gemara, Ishtik. Avner has no answer for Doeg. Doeg has effectively drawn David HaMelech's yichus into doubt, and no one can seem to answer him. Miyad vayomer HaMelech sha'al ata ben mi ze ha'alem. So he wants to know, whose son is this boy, meaning, is he even Jewish? Hasam karele nar, hacha karele elem, hacha kamarle, halacha nis alma mimeka, tse ush'al bebeis hamedrash. So why does Shaul start by calling him a yeled and later calls him an elem? Because that word elam sounds like elaim, meaning that something was hidden, and the thing that was nisalma, that was hidden from people, was this halacha. What halacha is it? It's whether or not we hold of this Ammoni Moavi, Ammoni v'lo Ammonis, or Ammoni v'lo it should really be Moavi v'lo Moaviyah, but whatever. Moavi v'lo Moavis. So what did they do? Tsevish ush'al bebeis hamedrash. They went to the base medrash to ask Doeg has a good taina. What are we going to do? So right now, poor David is in trouble. Shaul, they asked the same question that Doeg had asked. Amru le Ammoni v'lo Ammonis, Moavi v'lo Moavis. They got the same answer that Avner gave. Ikshiluhu Doeg kol hani kushiyasa. So Doeg asked all of his questions. Ishtiku. They had no answer in the base medrash. Things are perilous here for David HaMelech, guys. You gotta be like on the edge of your seat.
And what's going to be the repercussion?
If
They throw out maybe.
he's not Jewish,
No, I'm saying what,
So he can't kill Goliath?
he can kill Goliath. He just can't be king.
How come they didn't trust in Shmuel enough? Who said,
You can't read ahead. We're gonna get to that.
I was like, this was before or after he killed Goliath?
before.
It was when he showed up and volunteered to kill Goliath. He hasn't killed Goliath
Right.
yet.
So they're
This is a side
it sounds
conversation.
So Jewish.
It's a,
You gonna help us? Hang on. Tell me about your grandfather.
right. Who are you?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, but Ishtiku, Boilach Ruze Ale. So they were planning to proclaim that David was disqualified from entering the Kahal Hashem. Mi'ad the Amsa ben Ish Ushmo Yisra ha Yisraeli asher ba el Avigail bas Nachash uksiv Yeser Hayishmaeli. So this guy Yeser, the Ishmaelite, shows up. Amar Rava, why was he called the Ishmaelite? If he's called the Yisraeli, then he's called the Yishmaeli. So which one is it? You're either Yishmaeli or you're Yisraeli. So Amar Rava, no, he had a nickname of Yishmaeli. Malamet shechagar charbo ki Yishmael. He walked into the base medrash with a gun, with a sword. V'amar kol mi she'eno shomea halacha zo yidaker becherev. Anybody who doesn't hear the following halacha, I'm going to chop him up with my sword. Kach miku blanu beis dinu shel Shmuel haramasi. I have a Kabbalah from the Beis Din of Shmuel haramasi. Amoni v'lo amonis, Moavi v'lo Moavis. Finish. It's not a logical deduction. It's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. I'm sorry that you haven't heard it, but until you acknowledge this drasha, I'm not letting you out of the base medrash. He blocked the doorway with a sword, and that was it. And then the Gemara continues, and maybe we'll pick this up next time. Do you really believe him? So this is going to be very nogea when we get to Boaz. If you're the Rosh Yeshiva, can you make a psak that is nogea to you? So the Gemara's answer is basically you can make the psak before it was nogea to you. If you're already nogea b'davar, then you can't make the psak. So what Boaz is going to have to do when he shows up and says she's allowed to join B'Kahal Hashem, he has to prove that it's not nogea to him, but it's very nogea to him, right? So that's going to be part of what we're going to have to grapple with is how can Boaz. It seems that Ploni Almoni doesn't know that Rus can become Jewish, right? That's why he like flakes out. So if he doesn't know, and maybe nobody else knows, Boaz seems to be the only one who's like, oh, this is totally okay. But Boaz, you're nogea b'davar. You want to marry her, right? Okay, so we'll pick up from there. I don't think I had anything else for this time. We'll do the parallels next time, and then we'll start the actual Megillah. Okay.